my name's Michael Dutch, and for those of you that don't know me, I'm a product manager here at GeoSLAM, and today's session is going to focus on GeoSLAM Hub, our processing software for all our ZEB devices, and particularly 5.3. So I will, during the course of the session, cover a bit more of the basics. So we'll have kind of very basics. How do you interact with GeoSLAM Hub? I know a lot of you on the call may have used GeoSLAM Hub already and be better users than myself. However, there might be people very new to GeoSLAM. So I'm going to cover the very basics at the beginning, the first 10 minutes or so of the webinar. And then I'm going to go into the specifics of 5.3 and show you some very brief demos and how the new changes can be useful for you guys now when you're using Hub. And then right at the end, we'll do questions and answers. So anything you want to ask, feel free to drop it in throughout the webinar, or you can save it all to the end and I'll answer all the questions there. Okay, so very briefly, what's new in 5.3? So you can see there's three main things, the big changes that are in 5.3 that we've not really had before. The first one is a ZEB Pano Workflow. In the previous version, the ZEB Pano that some of you may have already, the ZEB Pano was processed using a separate tool, and we really wanted to get to the market with the Pano nice and quickly. We had a lot of interested customers, so we pushed it out, but we didn't have everything inside of GeoSLAM Hub yet. And now that we released this software this week, that's completely changed. So ZEB Pano now works completely inside of GeoSLAM Hub, and there is no need for a separate tool. So once someone purchases a ZEB Pano system, we update their GeoSLAM Hub license, and they're able to do additional functionality that we couldn't do before. But I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later. The next point there is offline activation. So for those customers that operate behind very strict IT protocols and security measures inside the networks and the computers inside their office, they may not be able to connect to the internet. You think of defense departments or potentially people working with high valuable data or very secret data that can't touch the internet. So these people have to be completely offline. So with 5.3, we have an offline activation tool, which allows that user to never touch the internet, but by passing files between the offline machine and an online machine, we're able to activate GeoSLAM Hub. And I'll talk about that in a little bit more detail later as well. And now we've got default processing options, or more precisely, we can customize the default processing options. So those of you that are familiar with GeoSLAM Hub will know that we can change the options when we reprocess the data. And that is still the case. You can definitely still do that. However, there's now going to be an option where you can override the default options. So you can make the changes earlier on and then process multiple data sets, all using the same processing options. So for those of you that are in very challenging environments or process the data in a very, very similar way every time, you can make them changes and then drag and drop into Hub, and it will always process with your bespoke settings. And again, I'll give you a quick demonstration of that later as well. So the big objective of 5.3 is obviously bring the ZEB Pano to everybody in a much simpler and easier to use format, but also bring some of the additional features, so offline and the processing options. So now I'll just cover GeoSLAM Hub, the basics, and this is going to be very simple for those of you that may not have used GeoSLAM Hub heavily before. So when you first open GeoSLAM Hub, you are greeted by the data tab. So you can see here just in the top left, we've got data selected. This is indicated by it being underlined in orange. We also have a datasets list, so all the datasets that I currently have on my machine. Bottom left, I've got a little tick here that says ready, and that essentially means my license information has been read and I'm ready to process SLAM. We've got some more icons here in the bottom right. So you can see we've got a small Wi-Fi icon, which means we are connected to the internet, and another one, a tick next to that, which means we can see the GeoSLAM servers. We're not constantly sending data back and forth, It's if you need to essentially refresh the entitlements on your license. If you want to check in or check out a license, having these two icons with a Wi-Fi symbol and the tick means that we can do it all that much faster. And the little bell icon next to that, that's our little notifications tab. So as you run different processes, you can click on notifications and see which ones are complete or which ones are still active. And then to the right of that, we can see which version number we're running. So here I'm running the latest 5.3. So that's all the icons to kind of let you know the health of GeoSLAM Hub once you've opened up the system. And then just in basic functionality, we've got the drop zone here. So drag and drop a data set and it will start processing. So with your standard ZEB Revo system and your ZEB Horizon, you drag and drop your data in here, that will automatically start processing. And if you're using the ZEB Revo RT, you drag and drop your .GeoSLAM file in here, that's already processed. So it will just take a moment or two to generate the viewer, and then all of these files will represent in exactly the same way. So you'll get a new data set and you have all the different functions available to you from that moment onwards. So a very brief look at the data tab. I'll quickly talk on the GeoSLAM viewer. So for those of you that are using quite older versions of the software, so version 4 and earlier, it's a brand new viewer, which is a lot nicer to fly around in 3D to get an understanding of the environment. But one thing I really want to touch on here, and I'm not sure if everybody knows it, but GeoSLAM Hub can be downloaded, installed, and opened up completely unlicensed with no activation code. And what that allows you to do is use GeoSLAM Hub as a viewer. So if I've got GeoSLAM Hub and I'm someone with a license, I can process the data, tidy the data up as I need it to be. And once I've finished with my data set, I can export the .GeoSLAM file and share it with somebody that does not have a license. But if they download GeoSLAM Hub from geoslam.com/support, they can install, open up my .GeoSLAM file and see any notes, annotations that I've left on the point cloud, and also open up the 3D viewer. So for those of you that work in maybe large teams or some teams that not everyone is very technical, but they're able to see and they want to understand the data, you can by all means download GeoSLAM Hub from the website. Do use it as a viewer. It's a really nice tool, and it means that everyone's inside the same platform, which would be great. Okay, and then a little bit about GeoSLAM Draw. So GeoSLAM Draw is essentially a mini CAD package that sits inside of GeoSLAM Hub. It allows you to do some really interesting things. So you can do some of your vectorization work, a lot of the 2D measured building survey work, you can do completely inside of GeoSLAM Draw, as well as geolocating the data, taking really nice slices, use some of the imagery from the ZEB Pano data. So I'll talk about some of these features a little bit later on. But one thing I really wanted to mention was there are actually lots of different modules for GeoSLAM Draw. And I'm not sure everyone's still aware of it, but everybody gets a GeoSLAM Draw Start as standard. So as part of the package, with every solution as a minimum, everyone gets GeoSLAM Draw Start. But there are 4 other packages, so Plan, BIM, Mining, and Pro, which have lots of different functions to them. So you can see here they're very application specific. So if you're doing 3D modeling for BIM, obviously the BIM package is what would make sense for you. And Pro is something where you'd have a really wide kind of number of jobs to do, and Pro will give you all the functions, so you can do absolutely everything from the vector work to volume calculations. So there are a lot of things you can do in these packages, and again, I'll mention something to do with Draw towards the end of the presentation. So I've touched on it already, but reprocessing options is something that is still inside of GeoSLAM Hub, and it will continue to be so. So if you're capturing data in a very challenging environment, if maybe during the scan something went wrong and you had to change the way you ended the scan, you might need to change the way the data is processed. And that can be done by hitting the ellipsis next to the data set and then hitting reprocess. And then you can optimize the way that SLAM processes your data set, essentially customizing the way SLAM works for you so that it's perfect for that environment that you've just scanned. Obviously, that takes a little bit of time. We do have another webinar that's up on GeoSLAM Academy, which teaches you about all the different processing options. So don't worry, I'm not going to go into that right now. But just to let the new users know that this is something that is available to you. And by all means, please do a little bit of digging around, watch the webinar, because it is a very valuable function to get the most out of your data. Okay. And one other thing to mention about GeoSLAM Hub 5.2 and onwards, all our licenses now are check-in and check-out, so you can activate, deactivate. As long as you've got that internet connection, you're able to share licenses across your team, which is really, really useful, and it means more people get access to Hub faster. Rather than waiting for a dongle to arrive, you can simply just email across an activation code and someone's able to use GeoSLAM Hub. Okay, so the next section, what's new in 5.3? So useful for absolutely everyone here. So one thing that is new, and I've already touched on, is the ZEB Pano Workflow. So for those of you that don't know the ZEB Pano, so the ZEB Pano is an additional accessory. Here it is with the ZEB Revo RT device. And we essentially mount a carbon fiber pole to the back of the scanner, and then use a 360 camera in order to capture the pano imagery. And the way it works is essentially stop and go functionality. So you would walk around, start up your scan as normal, walk around to a position where you want to capture the 360 image, stop, trigger the camera, and then move on to the next location. And the reason we do that is if you stop, it's much easier to process the data set, and also you're going to get the best image quality that we can possibly give you. If you're in motion and you take an image, the image will be blurred and essentially useless. So you do have to stop, take the image, and then move on. And this has been a really great accessory. Lots of people are using it, and you've probably seen it on social media. If you do want more information on it, please do let us know. There is a ZEB Pano specific webinar, which we'd be happy to share out with you. Okay, so then what's new in terms of GeoSLAM Hub and related to the ZEB Pano? And that is the workflow now that we can process the ZEB Pano all natively inside of GeoSLAM Hub. So it's much simpler than what we've had before. You can see here we've got a data set, and we've pressed that ellipsis icon, and then the drop down menu appears, the same one that we saw earlier, but now there is an additional icon here, add Pano images. Now I get to see that icon because I've got ZEB Pano on my license. For everyone that purchases a ZEB Pano system, we do ask that you let us know what license you wish to use the Pano with, and we will update your license so you don't have to do anything. And then by the time the Pano arrives, you open up the system and you'll also have this icon. You'd hit the Add Pano Images icon, and then Windows Explorer in the bottom right would appear. And then you just navigate to the location of where all your images are stored. So in this example here, I put all the images on my desktop in a nice folder. However, if you just plug in the ZEB Pano camera to your computer or your workstation, you can navigate directly to the Pano directory and copy the specific images across that way. Okay, and then once you, actually, let me just go back one moment. So then we hit open and click OK. And then you'd get a notification through the notifications in Hub that the image matching was successful. And then one thing we can also do is bring that information straight into GeoSLAM Draw. So after the successful messages come up inside of GeoSLAM Hub, then you can launch GeoSLAM Draw, and all the images will automatically be inside of your project. So you don't have to manually import the data. They'll also be colored based on height. So you can see in this image here, we've got green, yellow, and red, so that we can determine the different heights. And we also have different clusters of images as well. So you're able to select a different cluster. So when you're generating a layout, like I've got here, you only see the images that are specific to that layout. So you can create lots of different layouts of different floors. Obviously you can package them up, publish them with the Web Explorer. There's Web Publisher. There's lots of great things you can do once you're in there, but this means that going from capture to this stage here, where essentially you're doing post-processing work, is incredibly fast and really automated. So we're really excited to push this out. Definitely I am. And so the next bit is to give a very brief demo and show you guys how it's working. So I'll jump out of the presentation for now and just show you my GeoSLAM Hub. And let's hope I get my data sets right here. Yeah, okay. So very small scan. So you can see here, bottom right, I'm running 5.3. If I go to the status tab, show you my license details. I have the ZEB panning processing enabled. So once you purchase a system, tell us your license, and this will be on your license type. Okay, just jump back to data. And then we've got this data set here. I click on the ellipsis, add my Pano images, and choose them. So now I just navigate to the folder on my desktop that I prepared earlier. And click open. And then all the images will come through into here, and I just hit import. And that'll take a moment or two to copy all the images to my local folder, but also do the calculation that matches the images to the point cloud. So we can see there I got my notification, images were added successfully. Now I can launch GeoSLAM Draw. So GeoSLAM Draw, I don't have a project for this data set. Do I want to create the project? Yes. And submit. You can obviously choose different point clouds here if you've exported them, but I'm just going to use the full LAZ here. And it always just takes that extra moment or two when it's a live demo. All right, while that's whizzing away, I did see a question pop up, so let's just ask the question. Okay, yeah, so there's a question about offline activation, which I will get to in a second. And the question was, how does offline activation work with regards to Draw? So Draw, as you might know, requires an online license. That's what we can see here. Just click OK. You can see here in the top right, it's an online license. With the offline activation that we've got at the moment, it is specifically for that use case where you're never allowed to touch the internet. We are going to be working towards getting Draw completely offline as well, but that is not what's in 5.3. Okay, but we can see it's all happened here. All the images have gone through automatically into my project. I can obviously chop and take a look at the different images as well. I'm not quite sure what, and we can also load all the different, oh, okay, it's still running some of the processes. Okay, I've got to wait for it all to load up. But you can see all the different images, and we've got the different orientations on the images as well. Still going. Yeah. So you can see me testing it out there. Let's not look at them daft images. But yeah, so all the images are there, and they are in color as well. Let me try and find a less funny one. Yeah, so you can see I've got an image here. I can also change it from reflective to color, and then you get the full image there. Okay, so let's just jump back to the presentation. offline activation. Okay, so yeah, just like I touched on then, so the offline activation is just for GeoSLAM Hub. GeoSLAM Draw is not yet activated by this process. So this is just under the circumstances of very strict IT restrictions, and that computer cannot touch the internet. So we've got a small tool called the GeoSLAM Offline Activation Helper, and that needs to be installed on the offline machine, as well as the online machine for passing data back and forth. At the moment, it probably makes most sense that if you are a user, if one of your customers is this type of user that needs to be set up, they're probably best to contact support at geoslam.com, and they can help them walk through this process. It's not too complicated, but having the assistance of support there at least the first time would be really useful the way I see it. So I'll just give you a very quick demo and look at the activation tool. So I've got the activation helper here. I'll just close everything else down. So this tool allows you to both activate and deactivate licenses as well. So these licenses can be checked in and checked out, but it is quite a time-consuming process, so it's not as easy, obviously, as when you're connected to the internet. So I can click here and go into activate, and then the tool outlines almost like a wizard and kind of takes you through step by step the process. So step one, I'd use my activation code and save it in a certain location. Step two, fill in my user details, and then go to the customer portal, fill in your details there. So this would happen on the online machine. And then step four, you'd get a response file, and do that here, and then activate the license. So this is, and then obviously when you deactivate it, it's this process in reverse. So as I said, for now, what I'd recommend is contacting support, and they'll obviously be able to provide you this tool, make any relevant changes to your license, but also help you if you get into any difficulties trying to do this process. Obviously, once we get more feedback on it, or we build it out into be able to use with GeoSLAM Draw, there might be some slight changes, but the more kind of you guys can feed back to us, the better we can make the process. But that is the offline activation helper as it is now. And then the last thing I wanted to bring up was default processing options. So I've talked about there are default options already. You can change them when you reprocess a data set. But what is different here is that we can now override the default processing options as well. So in the top right, I've got GeoSLAM Hub. I've gone to the config tab, pressed advanced options. And now for those of you that have been in this window before, you can see there is a new box, override default processing options. And then we've got options for both Horizon and for Revo. And essentially you would hit configure, and then the reprocessing options would appear, and you can change the way the data set's processed how you'd like. So if you are always flying with Horizon attached to a UAV, there's probably certain parameters that we recommend you use always, and now you can apply them nice and easily here by just configuring for Horizon, changing the parameters, clicking save in the bottom right, and then that will always apply. So every data set that you then drop into GeoSLAM Hub will get processed in this way. Another parameter I'll mention is draft mode. So draft mode is probably the quickest way at the moment we can present to you the Horizon data set. Essentially what we do is we, rather than process all of the Horizon data, we only process a single ring of information. That means we can do it a lot faster. And we also don't generate the 3D viewer. So for somebody that is very much just interested in the point cloud, as quick as possible and understanding, did everything in my space get captured correctly? By enabling draft mode, it means you can drag and drop lots of data sets in, get the results as fast as possible, and then make a decision about whether if you want to reprocess it in full or whether you want to leave site because you're confident in all the data that was captured. So I'll just very quickly show you this on my hub. So in here, so if I go into config, advanced options, you can see I've got them here. So I'll just quickly do a configuration. I'll put draft mode on and change my maximum range to 20, click save. So I can obviously reset this and go back to what it was before, but I'll leave it configured. And if I go back to the data tab, we can see here at the top that the color has now changed to red, and it's letting you know that there are default processing options that have been applied, just in case you forgot that you've got draft mode on and your data doesn't look as you'd expect it. This is just a warning to let you know them options have been applied. So if I go back to config, reset my options and go to data, you can see here this is back to normal. Great, okay, so we'll just jump back into the presentation. I think the next section should be, okay, so that's just what I showed you there. So the fact that the drop zone changes to a different color so that you know everything's been overridden. Yeah, so we covered all that. Actually, no, so that last point I've not covered. So if you generally do scan a very similar environment all the time, and find there are specific parameters that are very useful for you in that specific environment, we'd be really interested to hear what parameters you use and why you find them useful. And that way we can start to kind of build out environment specific configuration, so that you guys are able to maybe save templates that are specific to you. So any feedback that you have on the parameters that you use, I'd be really interested to hear that. So if you can feedback, that'd be fantastic. Okay, so then the last bit is questions and answers. So I'll quickly fire through some of the questions that have popped up in this session. So so a question there about if I've merged projects together, do I still have the possibility to import panos? I think what I would recommend, so if you use the GeoSLAM Hub merge, I don't think that would work, but there are other options in the way you would do it. So if you go into GeoSLAM Draw and merge the data sets in GeoSLAM Draw, that way you can apply that same transform to all your Pano locations. So it will be a little bit more complex, but it is definitely possible. That's a really good point. I think we might detail that out in a little bit more in an Academy post, but I'll let you know. Okay, yeah, so the ZEB horizon and the ground plate or the reference plates, we almost had it in this version, but sadly it's not been in 5.3 yet. We are currently and actively working on it, and so hopefully very soon we'll have another webinar, and I'll be able to tell you that the reference plates with the horizon working again, but it's not in 5.3, but I promise it'll be very soon. So there's a question there about being able to correct drift or potentially slippage in the data, and that always comes back to the reprocessing options for us. So if you have moved very quickly in an environment, if there's a specific space that has not got enough features, simply by changing the way you process the data, you can really reduce the impact of drift or slip. For me personally, I've just increased two parameters, convergence threshold and window size, and in environments that are quite feature poor, that will or should help you out. It does increase processing time, but it's what we would recommend. Is there any way to currently change the file path from C to D? So right now, there isn't officially a way to change the file path. If you, for a technical reason, if it's an absolute requirement, support can do it. However, it's not something that's as standard in GeoSLAM Hub. Literally the two projects that are being worked on this week and probably the beginning of next week by the Hub and Draw team are the reference plates for Horizon and being able to change the file path locations. So that is to change the location of the license information, but also change the location of the data folder. So it will be something that is coming out soon, but it is not in 5.3. Okay, it looks like we don't have any more questions, which is fine for me. There is one more slide though that I will touch on. So I know last time we had a webinar, we promised GeoSLAM Draw detailed webinars, and they've not happened yet, but I can confirm that we are going to be doing them this month. So on the 15th and the 22nd of August, they're both Thursdays. We will be doing a GeoSLAM Draw detailed look, and that'll be by one of the application engineers here at GeoSLAM. And we'll talk about the different packages in detail. So kind of what specifically can you do with GeoSLAM Draw Plan and GeoSLAM Draw Pro, and look at the different packages that way. So please do attend that. I know there's quite a lot of confusion about what packages are in what. So that'd be a really good webinar to go to, or both of them will be great webinars to go to. For any more resources, geoslam.com/academy is really great. You might have seen there's been some changes to our website. So there's now a GeoSLAM Hub section, and you can download extra information from GeoSLAM Hub or geoslam.com/hub. And there's also the geoslam.com/support page, and there's lots of resources in there. You can download 5.3 from the website. So please go ahead and do that if you've not already done it. But that is it for today's webinar. Thanks everyone for joining in and listening. If you do have any other questions that you couldn't, that didn't come to you during the session, please feel free to just drop me an email as well, and I can answer some of them questions for you. Okay, thanks for joining me today, guys, and I'll speak to you soon.